Welcome to What's Real in Real Estate, where we talk about what's really happening in the real estate market here in Las Vegas, all around the country, and all around the world. I'm Ellie Morris with Signature Real Estate Group, and I couldn't be more excited than to have J.C. Melvin on today. J.C., welcome. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Well, thanks, Ellie. I'm excited to be here on your show.
This is great. This is so great. I've known J.C. for a while. You're not only, I don't just respect you as a realtor mind, I respect you as a person. You're one of the good people in this town, and I feel blessed to have you as a friend, man. Really
thanks.
I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
I appreciate that.
But take a minute, and I'm sure everybody who's watching this, who's in our business, knows you. But for those that don't, take a minute and tell everybody just a little bit who J.C. Melvin is.
Sure. I'm a guy that's just worked hard in the real estate business, and I'm in my 42nd year right now. And through that process and raising my family, I've got two daughters, and I was a single parent for most of those years when they were growing up, and decided to get into the real estate business. I left the bar and restaurant business and got into the real estate business, and it's been very good to me, and spawned a couple of other businesses for me. As you know, I've spoken all over the world, including Eastern Europe and Western Europe, and mostly on real estate topics or train the trainer stuff. And then I got involved here in Nevada in legislative issues as they came up. When the agency changes, I don't know if the public is even aware, there were massive agency changes that took place back in the early 90s, and I spearheaded that and worked with the real estate division here and was the chair of the agency task force here in Nevada for the real estate division. And that led into an opportunity where I began to work as an expert witness in real estate litigation, and so I see a lot of what the problems are in the industry, and that's kind of kept me focused on when there's a major change in the industry. I'm usually the one that, I've got to know every detail about it and how it's going to affect the public and the industry, the agents and the brokers, and so. That's just one of the things that, I don't know, this will sound weird, but that kind of excites me to be in the know.
Well, that is why I was so glad you're coming on, because there has been a little change, or there's a possible change in our industry. This NAR settlement, everybody's talking about it. I was in a meeting yesterday. I finally said to the guys, you know what, leave me alone with it. We'll see what happens. But you've been going around town.
Right, I've done 7 presentations to brokers and agents, and some members of the public have actually come. I'm scheduled to go out to Pahrump on the 12th, and then I'll be up in Mesquite, and they're just booking me. One of the biggest title company in the state is booking me to do another couple of them for the industry. We are all talking about what's called the NAR Settlement, NAR.
NAR Settlement.
Yeah, NAR.
National Association of Realtors.
Right, the National Association of Realtors. So. It's been exciting, and for anybody that's followed this, any members of the public that have followed this, there's a little bit of news that's been out there about it on both social media and
a lot of the news has been misinformation. There's been a lot of misinformation.
Well, unfortunate for the public and those in the industry,
yes.
About 90 to 95% of the information that's either on social media or on network television or cable television is misinformation.
Yes.
It's implying things that aren't part of the settlement. It's implying things that aren't even so. So you've got a whole bunch of people out there that are not understanding what has happened to begin.
So take a minute and give everybody an idea just what this settlement is all about.
Sure, and it's important for the public because the public is going to become educated on this after it's implemented. I should say, so the settlement offer. The National Association of Realtors, NAR, which we'll refer to as NAR, they were sued along with most of the large brokerages in the country, and it's a class action lawsuit. And unfortunately, like many class action lawsuits, this was attorney generated. And I'll just start out by saying the end result isn't going to be too big a change. However, there's a lawsuit out there that alleges the public was being misled, and it turns out that they weren't being misled. So,
right. Right. And I mean, I read in the paper about this, and I'm reading this. I'm thinking, my gosh, this is so untrue. This is untrue. This is untrue.
Right.
But it's out there in black and white.
Oh, so let's explain the crux of it, shall we?
Please.
To the public. So why the lawsuit? What happened? So the way real estate has worked for the last 75 years or so in the United States of America is a real estate agent like yourself, Ellie, or myself. We go out and we meet with a seller that wants to sell their property. And we call that a listing. They want to list their property for sale. So we would go out and say, okay, and we would do, the real estate agent actually does a tremendous amount of work. And a lot of times the public's not aware of all the work that goes on behind the scenes. It's not just look at a house and guess and say, oh, this is what it's worth. There's actually a lot of research that goes into it. Then you've got to compare what the upgrades are and all these things. So you come up with a market analysis or a comparable market analysis. Then we meet with the seller and we say, okay, this is what it looks like your home is worth in between here and here. This is a reasonable range. So let's use an average priced home today in our market. It's about $470,000 right now. So we might say, hey, your home, it looks like it's worth between $470,000 and $480,000, somewhere in that ballpark, based on the sales that have happened and the condition of your home and these things. And the seller says, okay, well, I'd like to, this is what I owe on my mortgage. And the sellers want to know, and I get it, is how much will I get after the smoke clears, right? So we usually prepare a cost sheet. We always prepare a cost sheet. And it shows the payoff of the mortgage. It shows the expenses of the escrow expenses, the title expenses, the recording fees, the inspection fees, the brokerage fees. And when we get to the brokerage fee amount, what has been traditional for the last 75 years or even 100 years is, Mr. Seller, if you work with me, this is the way I usually work. I'll usually take the listing. I'm going to charge you this percent, whatever that percentage is. And by the way, that percentage has been negotiable forever.
That's important. I want to take a minute because I kept seeing, there were articles in the RJ that the consumer had to list with the realtor. They had to pay X percent. There wasn't, it was non-negotiable, which I've only been in this business 18 years, but in the 18 years I've been in, it's all been negotiable.
It's all been negotiable. And we've seen commissions from a low of 1% to a high of 8 and 10%. So it really depends on what the seller is looking to accomplish as to what that's going to look like. Are there some areas that seem to be common? Yes, but there's no fixed commission rate, nor has there
never
ever
has been.
Okay.
Right.
So usually the listing broker, so if I go out and we decide on the value, we talk about what the costs are going to be, and we list the property, what I have done or what brokers have done for the last 75 years then, is they've made an offer of compensation to another agent, an agent that's working with or now representing a buyer.
Right.
So the beauty of that is that you could look in the multiple listing service, and number one, you could find all the properties that met your buyer's needs and wants and desires. Number two, there would be a notation in there that, hey, by the way, the seller, through the listing broker, has offered to pay a fee to the buyer's agent, okay? And so the buyer's agent could see that, and they say, oh, okay, I'll be compensated for all of my work. And it was kind of rolled into the price, if you will. Now,
right.
This is where this is what this lawsuit's all about. And now, and so it was alleged that, well, that amount was a fixed amount, and that listing brokers were telling sellers they had to offer at least this much money.
False.
Okay,
Yep.
And that was false.
Yep.
And so as part of this settlement now, one of the parts of it is that the listing brokers, the National Association of Realtors, and all MLSs across the country will no longer, effective probably around July, middle of July.
Now, I got a question for you about that, because that's what they've been saying. This has not gone to court yet.
No.
It has to go to court before it even takes effect. So more than likely, we're going to go past July, aren't we?
Well, the offer was made on March 15th, the National Association of Realtors, and they negotiated this settlement. So everybody's happy with it, but it does require court approval, Ellie. Okay. So you're right on the money there. They expect that to happen sometime around the month of July.
Okay.
So if it does happen in July,
right.
then this law
we'll
goes
assume
into
that's
effect in July.
Okay.
And so what's the effect of it? How is the public affected? Because that's what the public really
Absolutely.
wants. So here's the deal. So in the MLS will, number one, no longer be able to, they will not have the ability to offer a buyer broker compensation in the MLS. And so that has been the stimulus of a lot of misinformation. So a lot of people are thinking, oh, so the seller is no longer going to pay a buyer's broker. Well, that's not what the settlement says. What the settlement says is a listing broker cannot make an offer of compensation through the MLS.
Right, through the MLS.
Through the MLS. So we're going to go back to the old-fashioned way of doing things before we had computers, which is if you have a listing, Ellie, and I've got a buyer that wants to see it, I'm going to call you up and say, hey, by the way, Ellie, is your seller offering or are you guys offering compensation to a buyer's agent?
I think what's going to bother a lot of realtors, they have to now communicate.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yeah, it's not just on the
right.
computer anymore.
Pick up the phone and call somebody.
Yeah. There are some parts of this settlement, by the way, that I think are going to be a benefit to the public.
I do too.
So it's not all the sky is falling. So things haven't changed that much, except for that can't be published. The compensation cannot be published in the MLS. So and then another big part. There's two big components. That's one of the big components. The other big component in this settlement is that while many buyers agents and many brokers in Nevada have been working with what we call a BBA or a buyer's brokerage agreement for many years. In fact, a buyer's brokerage agreement in several states has been required for years and years and years. And so there's really nothing to it. For those in the industry that have never worked with a buyer's brokerage agreement, the agents are a little nervous about it. And they're uncomfortable in how to explain it to the buying public. And to the buying public, I just say to you this, and I've said this for years, you want to work with somebody that's willing to put in writing what they're going to do to represent you.
That's right, exactly.
And so I see it as a plus.
I do too.
Part of this settlement requires that before a buyer's agent shows you any property, they must have a written buyer's brokerage agreement. And in that written buyer's brokerage agreement, it must spell out what the compensation is that the buyer is going to offer to the buyer's agent. So that's got to be spelled out.
And there are times where the seller's going to offer compensation that will cover all that.
Correct.
It won't cost the buyer a penny.
Correct.
And there are times, possibly, some sellers might say, I'm not offering anything.
Right.
And then that buyer will have to compensate their agent to have their service.
Right. And herein lies the rub of the kind of the good and the bad part of this settlement. The good part is I think the buyer is now and has always been entitled to know what their agent's being paid. I don't know that the buyer is aware of all of the things that the agent does behind the scene, but they're going to learn that now.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, then, in this settlement, the buyer's agent is not allowed to accept more compensation than is agreed to between them and the buyer.
That's good. I will tell you, one of the things that bothers me about our industry is the transaction fee. Okay, I get charged $5.95. I get paid a good buck. I eat it. I see some agents who get charged $5.95 and they charge $9.95.
Well,
that's just greed.
Well,
and we're going to eliminate some of that greed, aren't we?
I don't know if that is per se greed because different agents they're all running their own businesses.
Yep.
And some have staff. I know agents that have staffs of 5 and 6 people that are not licensed, that are working, that they're paying on payroll. So quite honestly, I would understand why their transaction fee, which is really a broker additional commission, why their fee might be higher than somebody else's fee. So I never question that. I'm more of what are you getting? What's the caliber of person that you have working for you? And what are you willing to pay them for representation?
Right.
And let's be clear, buyers and sellers are still going to want representation. This is a huge investment. Normally, the biggest investment that a member of the public that most are ever going to make is the purchase of their own home. We start talking $400,000. Our average price is $470,000. We've got hundreds of sales every year and every quarter of over $1 million. It's a big investment. And for me, I want representation, especially if I'm in an area that I don't know, or especially if I don't know real estate.
Oh, absolutely.
If I'm a car mechanic, I know all about fixing the car. I can listen to your car and maybe tell you what's going on. But I don't know anything about negotiating a real estate contract. I don't know anything about inspections, about seller's real property disclosure form, about an amendatory FHA clause. I don't even know what half that stuff is, right? I want representation. Yeah. And I think the public still wants representation. And I just strongly recommend it. And then they can interview agents and decide who they feel good about and hire them.
Well, there are some people, I had some listings just recently where I got a call from somebody, a buyer. They wanted to work directly with me. Now, I will be frank, I don't like doing dual agency.
Okay.
I don't like the liability. I like the extra money, but I'd rather refer to somebody, take a fee, and let them have their own representation.
Sure.
So, they could do that too. Say, you know what, I don't need a representation. I'll just let the seller's agent represent me, which means you're not being represented at all.
Right, and you're probably going to see a little bit more of that. You've got a number of buyers and sellers that are sophisticated. That quite honestly, there are some sellers that just simply do not need a real estate agent, and now that percentage is probably very small. And there are probably some buyers that also could buy a home and not need a real estate agent, and that percentage is probably also very small. So is it possible now, if I'm working with a buyer that, or if a buyer is interested in purchasing a home, that they might contact the seller direct or reach out to the listing agent more than we've seen in the past and say, hey, I want to buy this home and I don't want representation, because they have a fear of not having the ability to pay for the representation.
Right.
And you know what? That's probably worth talking about for a minute with your viewers.
Agree. Absolutely.
And here's the deal. This settlement that was spawned by this lawsuit, which was, now you talk about greed, this is what we call an attorney-generated lawsuit.
Yeah.
And while there's a couple of good things that are going to come out of it, most of the things that are going to come out of this lawsuit are not a benefit to the public. And here's an example. If we've got a seller that's got the perfect home for somebody and they have told their agent, I am not paying a fee, I'm not offering to pay a fee. And maybe it's because their listing agent couldn't explain the benefit of offering to pay a fee. And so they're not going to. And now you've got a lower income buyer. And the only way that lower income buyer can buy that house is if they come to agreement with an agent and agree to pay the fee. The problem is, if we took a $400,000 house, for example, and I'm just going to throw some numbers around, I won't go through all of the details. If we went to a $400,000 house and a buyer had to pay their broker on what we would say is kind of a fairly common fee, and they had to put a minimum down on FHA and pay their normal closing cost and loan costs and all the other things, they would probably have to come out of pocket for about $32,000, okay, to buy that $400,000 house. For sellers out there, if the seller had decided to pay through their broker a fee to the buyer's agent, the seller might be able to price their house at $415,000 and offer to pay concessions and or the fee. Yeah. And the buyer now, what the buyer is concerned about, what's my monthly payment?
That's right.
The buyer could maybe afford to buy this house for $415,000 with only $20,000 out of pocket, as opposed to $32,000 out of pocket. So what happens for the seller then is they open up their market to that many more buyers that can look at their house, which you know and I know drives the value of their home up when there's more competition.
Absolutely.
And by the way, so in the scenario I just gave you, one for $400,000, because if they're not paying a commission, if the buyer has to pay a commission, they're going to look to pay less for the house. Okay,
that's right.
It's got to come from somewhere.
That's right.
Right. This is why investors go by for sale by owners all the time, and for sale by owners find out later that on average across the United States they sell for 8 to 10% less than if they had been listed with a real estate broker.
Right.
So this is a danger for the novice that wants to go out on their own and thinks that this is going to be a benefit to them.
Well, they can take solace in knowing there's a lot of television shows that'll guide them along the way.
Sure there are. That's right, yeah. By the way, the seller that paid the full commission, in my example, netted about $3,000 more than the seller that paid no commission.
Absolutely.
So it's something that the public, I'll say to the sellers, if they're thinking about selling, they want to sit down with a sharp agent, with the agent they know, like, and trust, and go through, what do the numbers look like? What would it be if I didn't offer to pay a fee? What would it be if I did offer to pay a fee? And what do you think? And ask for the agent's input, because the truth is nothing's going to change. If I had to bottom line this, Ellie, I'd say this. We're going to take the fee that was paid and we're going to move it from a seller expense to a buyer expense on paper. But the money is going to be the same, except the buyer now has to come out of pocket with more money if they're the ones that are actually paying it. So you are going to see more concessions in the new home sales. In the new home sales, which typically sell for far more than the resale market, the builders have enough room on that they're offering concessions. So they'll pay a buyer's fee, and they'll offer a buyer concession for the buyers to pay for an upgrade or a lot upgrade or
Harmony Homes right now is offering I guess I did 2 deals with them this year. 5% towards your closing costs.
Yes.
And to buy down the rate, if you're a veteran, an additional $2,500.
Right.
That's the new, but that's new construction.
That's right. And so what's going to happen here is that sellers in the resale market are now going to be, it's going to look like they're competing more with the new home communities.
Right.
So, because you don't want to take buyers that don't have that kind of cash to buy and push them out of the market. You want to offer concessions, or you simply want to continue through your listing broker to offer compensation to the buyers, to the buyer's agent.
I think it'll be a smaller percentage of sellers that will not offer something.
It'll be a small percentage.
Yeah.
I anticipate when this goes into effect, whether it's July or August or whatever it is, I anticipate that we're going to have a little disruption in the industry. There's been some reporting on national news and some speculation that of the 1.5 million Realtor members, we're the largest trade organization in the United States. We've got about 1.5 million members. And some have said, we think 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 of those will get out of the business as a result of this.
That's an interesting thing you say, because when I was on the board, I learned that we are a business and we need that income. But boy, oh boy, if we can trim about 25% of these people that don't do anything at all or one deal a year, it would just make everything better for everybody, I think.
Right. You do have a large number of agents that first of all, they have a perception before they're in the real estate business that what this business is I'm going to get a real estate license because I just bought a house. And it looks like all the agent did was drive me around in a nice car. We had nice lunches. We looked at pretty houses. And when I saw the check, the $10 or $15 or $20 or $30,000 they got in commission, man, I can do this. And so a lot of people get into the business, right, with the illusion that this is what it's going to be. And then they find out that, it's a completely different world. Right. And so that's why, by the way, the failure rate in real estate is 87% within 2 years. So let me clarify that. 87% of the people that get a real estate license and come into the business are out of the business within 2 years, because it's a lot harder than it looks from the outside.
Absolutely.
So, and I think with all of this, I think there'll be a little shuffling. Yeah, I do think that we'll probably lose 100 or 200,000, maybe even 300,000 agents across the country. I think that will be in effect. That's right. And the reason I've told you I've done 7 presentations. And I ask at the beginning of each presentation, and there's anywhere from 50 to 150 brokers and agents in there, and I ask them, how many of you have read the NAR Settlement? Now, we're in the industry, so we really should be up to speed on it. And less than 10% have read it. So they're believing all the misinformation that's out there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
one of my concerns, I do a lot of business. We're in a veteran community. We have Nellis, we have Creeks, and we have almost 250,000 retirees here. And probably 70% of my business is with veterans. It's been a focus of mine. I'm concerned about the veteran, because the veteran, per VA rules, cannot pay a commission if they have to. They can't pay a transaction fee. Some veterans are going to have a difficult time buying a home unless we make some changes.
Right. And I will tell you, we're very fortunate here in our market, here in the Las Vegas, Henderson, Southern Nevada market. I think you're a member of VA Rep, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you know that your organization, and thank you for volunteering, and thank you for doing that, Ellie, because that's really important, and you've hit it. Potentially the hardest hit group out of this, unless we get the changes made, is the vet.
Right.
But we're very fortunate in our market, and representing the VAs, the VA buyer, your organization, VA Rep, the national director for VA Rep is a member of our community and a member of our association right here in Las Vegas. And so I have been in touch with Ernie. Ernie. Of course. I've been in touch with Ernie daily on this issue, and he has talked to members of Congress, They are hopeful that they might have a resolution for the vet within 2 or 3 weeks. So before this even comes into play.
Good. We need that.
You're right, though. The settlement is kind of goofy. Now, by the way, FHA came out with a memorandum dated March 28th, so last week, and clarified the FHA rules that are in place will be acceptable enough that the buyer could accept buyer concessions from the seller to pay their broker.
Oh, that's good. I didn't read that. That's really good. That's great.
So it used to be FHA would only allow 6% contribution to the buyer. And now that they're saying whatever that fee is on top, if it's offered as a concession to the buyer to pay their broker, that will not be counted against the 6%. So FHA has fallen right into line here, and we believe that VA will too.
I am sure it will. They have to. Yeah.
Because we don't want to hurt the vet. Right now, the only group that is potentially hurt by this settlement is the low-income person. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because it's all done under the guise of making the playing field even and Steven for everybody, and it's doing just the opposite of that.
There was an article in this morning's RJ about the income you need to buy a home in the state of Nevada. It wasn't just Southern Nevada. The average price per home in the state of Nevada is $434,000 something. You need to make $111,000 to afford that home.
Right.
That's a problem, man.
Right. When the average income down here is about 55.
Yeah.
So it is a problem. So,
and by the way, in 2020, that average income was $71,000.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Well, we've got a lot more people that have migrated into.
But in 4 years, it went from 71,222 to over 111,000.
Wow.
And interest rates made a difference. We were at 2 and 3% back then. I know that, but still.
Sure,
yeah,
and if interest rates drop, so we all thought in the industry here, as interest rates went up, we thought, oh my gosh, the housing prices, everybody was like, our housing price is going to go in the toilet, and they certainly have not. No. We had a little bump for a couple of months, and then everybody said, the heck with this, and prices have continued to grow. So our owners have equity that's continuing to build, and this is off of the NAR settlement thing. You've probably shared this with your audience, but if a buyer is thinking about buying, I encourage them today, do not wait for the interest rates to go down, because it turns out to be nothing but a mistake.
I saw an article that talked about that. In 1993, if in 1993 you decided I'm not going to buy until rates go down, you wouldn't have bought till like 2013. Or I forget what, it was a long span.
And you would have lost 100 or 200 or 300 or 400% on your money, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So people are going to try to time the market, time this, time that. You're kidding yourself. The geniuses can't figure it out.
Right.
So who am I to figure it out?
Well, we know if we take a look at the last 50 years of real estate, and we put a starting point here of a good 1950s, take 75 years, 1950, and we come to 2024, and we look at the values that went up and down and down and up and all that, and we drew a graph, we'd see an average increase, average appreciation of about 4%.
Yeah, right.
For the entire 75 years.
Right.
And so real estate is a good investment. Now, as real estate agents and as realtors, of course, we can never guarantee profits. However, we know that historically the value is going to go up. So it's a great investment. And so I say to those that are renting, boy, I'll tell you what, now's the time to get together with an agent. And even if you have credit problems today or something like that, now's the time to get together with your agent and get a plan started and buy something.
Yeah, and JC, even if it's not a great investment, it beats the heck out of renting.
Right.
Because people whine about interest rates, 8%, 7%, 6%. How about 100% when you rent?
Yeah, you're paying 100% interest because you're never going to see it again.
Never.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, and I wish people would stop, and this probably took place back in the early 2000s, where people's mindset was, my home is an investment. And it never should have been.
Right.
A home is where you go to sleep at night, where you raise your family, where you live, where you enjoy that life. I never looked at my home as an investment.
Right.
I have to live somewhere. Might as well own it versus
Right.
rent from somebody else.
But the result of owning a home was tremendous.
Absolutely.
Just tremendous. And it is part of the American dream, right? And you get to take pride in your yard and your white picket fence if you've got a white picket or whatever.
And it's the easiest way to build any kind of wealth.
Sure, it is. So, one of the questions that I've been asked, mostly from those in the industry about this NAR settlement, was why did the National Association of Realtors settle?
Yeah.
And so, I'd just like to clarify that for
Please.
the audience, because you always get pundits out there, Monday morning quarterbacks, that I would have never settled. They should have fought them.
Of course.
Because we felt the NAR was on the right side of protecting the public and, private property rights. There's nobody in the country that looks out for private property rights for everybody, for all the consumers and citizens of the country. There's nobody that does a better job than the National Association of Realtors and the realtor community. That's what they do. So why did they settle if they were right and this lawsuit was bogus? And the lawsuit, I started to say earlier, is based on attorney greed. Because, by the way, the $418 million, most of that's going to go to attorneys.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. So that it's a greed-generated lawsuit, in my opinion, my humble opinion. So why did they settle? Well, because if they were going to appeal, which they had an opportunity to, they lost in a lawsuit with a jury. If they were going to appeal, they had to put up a bond of $5.4 billion with a B. And
that would have broke them.
It would have broke them and bankrupt them, because we don't have that. We're a not-for-profit organization. So the realtor community and the National Association is not designed to make profit. It's designed to give back to the community, okay, and the industry. And so we don't have that kind of money. So to appeal it and try and fight that, we'd go bankrupt. So that was out. Number two, even if we did fight it, and even if we could come up with $1 or $2 or $3 or $400 million to fight it, over 2, 3, 4 years until we got to a Supreme Court decision or whatever was necessary. And let's suppose that we won it. When I say we, let's suppose the National Association of Realtors actually won. Well, then everybody else, all the other realtor members, the local associations across the country, people like yourself and myself, we would still actually be in the lawsuit.
Yes.
So the organization would have won, but none of its members or sub-organizations, it wouldn't have solved the problem. So that was no good. And the only real thing to do was to settle. Even though we think it's bogus, we're like, okay, let's settle this and be done with it. Let's redefine it for the industry. Let's make some clarifications. Let's require this. We agree to require this buyer brokerage agreement, which I think is a good idea for the public. So for the buyers that might be out there that have never signed a buyer's brokerage agreement before, the next time you sit down with an agent and talk to them, don't be surprised when they say, hey, by the way, here's the buyer's brokerage agreement, and let me go over it with you, and you've got to sign it before I can show you property.
I do wish they would take that buyer's brokerage agreement and simplify it a little bit.
Right.
It's so lengthy and wordy.
Right. Well, I've created. We have one for our company.
Oh, do you?
Much
simpler, I'm sure.
It's fairly simple. It's fairly straightforward. It's not scary for the public. It's like, here it is. It's compliant with the settlement. And one of the things that I think is good is a part of the settlement. And so your audience might appreciate this as well. So wherever there is talk of commission, whether it's on the listing contract that I signed when I'm listing my house to sell, or whether it's on the buyer's brokerage agreement, or even whether it's on a cost sheet, wherever the word commission is inserted, there must be a disclosure in there that says commissions are not set by law. Good. Commissions are negotiable.
Good.
So everywhere that a consumer would see this, they're going to see a notice that says commissions are fully negotiable. They're not set. And so most consumers, especially if they've bought or sold homes before, are already aware of that. But for the one that's a new consumer, it'll just put them on notice. Oh, these are negotiable. Hey, can I negotiate my commission with you? Sure. What would you like to do? How do you want to work? And then it's up to them to choose the agent that they feel most comfortable with. I always say, when you're evaluating things, you've got to evaluate the whole picture, because you can go buy what kind of car do you drive?
A Genesis.
A Genesis. Oh, that's the nicest one they build, isn't it?
From Hyundai, yeah.
Yeah, but it's
I buy the least. I have the cheapest one, but it's still a Genesis.
yeah. But and can I ask, what did you pay for that?
I bought it used with. This was a great deal. 7,800 miles.
Okay.
For 30 grand.
For 30 grand.
Yeah.
But you can get one of the small Kias. You can buy new
You
for
can-
10 or 12,000.
That's right.
And by the way, let me ask a couple questions. Does your new Genesis that you bought used for 30 grand, does that have the 4 tires on it?
It has 4 tires.
So does that Kia for 12
Same
grand.
4 tires.
Do you have the one steering wheel?
I got the one steering wheel, just
Same
like
as
the
the
Kia.
Kia.
Yep.
Right. Do you have windows that roll down?
Yeah.
You know I'm old when I'm doing this
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they really don't roll down anymore.
No, they actually
right?
even the cheap Kia has power windows now.
Yes, right. So, but there's a difference. Why did you not buy the cheap Kia for $10,000 or $12,000 and you spent $30,000 for a used vehicle? So the same thing is true in virtually any. What do you get what you pay for? Is what I'm saying. So don't jump to, and there's nothing wrong with a Kia, by the way.
No. My wife drives a Hyundai Elantra,
Okay.
and she loves it. It's similar to the Kia.
One of the greatest cars ever built, right there.
Yeah, great car.
Hyundai Elantra. Yeah. So
What do you see as some of the downside to this for the consumer? Because I don't see any downside for the realtor that is committed and dedicated to the business. They're going to be fine.
Yeah.
What about the consumer?
yeah, the only downside I actually see, if there's any at all for the consumer, is as this becomes implemented in July. And so as we go through the second half of this year in 2024, there's going to be some confusion on the part of the consumer because what they're getting from national news, and there'll be a big blip when the settlement is approved by the courts. You'll see another 2 weeks worth of hysteria on TV.
Yeah.
And that will confuse the public a little bit. So
Oh, it'll confuse the public a lot because the media will confuse the public a lot.
Exactly. And but this country, we're news hounds here, so things are exciting for a week or two, and then they're gone, and we
Right.
go back to normal.
That's right.
It'll also confuse some that are in the industry, especially those that are working part-time in the industry and are not staying right on top of what's happening. There'll be some confusion in the industry. So that'll be number one, and that'll just be a blip for a few months, and then it'll kind of clear itself up. And then number two, as I mentioned earlier, depending on how this falls out, the person that's going to be the consumer that's going to be most adversely affected is the consumer that is short on cash.
Yeah.
And so, I love nothing better than to help young,
me too.
young people, whether they're married or young families or single or whatever. I like helping retired folks. I work with a lot of retired folks too. But I get such a thrill out of helping somebody in their early to mid 20s buy their first house.
Or I don't care if they're. I had a guy just recently, 47 years old,
His first house.
first house.
Yeah.
I can't tell you. That guy had tears and he welled up.
Sure.
When he had the keys, he actually looked at him and kept looking at him. He couldn't believe these were the keys to his first house at 47 years old.
That's exciting.
It is.
It is exciting.
Absolutely.
And, and I work with a lot of older folks. I guess I probably fall into that category as myself.
Nobody's older than me anymore, man.
But, I just helped a young lady that's retired, and she really wanted to make a move up, and and I'm not talking about me, but she never ever could have made this happen without an agent helping.
Of course not.
And it was actually such a beautiful thing, wonderful. However, if she had tried to do this on her own, there's a good chance this would have been a completely different story.
More than likely, it would have been a disaster for her.
And I think there are going to be some disasters out there as a result of this.
I'm afraid so.
And where I'm concerned, or where I see the disasters coming, really is from that buyer or that seller, because there's sharks on both sides of the table, right?
Yes.
And so for that person that decides and they get in their head from this that I don't need an agent. First of all, you've never needed an agent. You've always had the ability to do it on your own.
Absolutely.
Deciding to work with an agent and pay a professional fee to have representation, you wouldn't go to court by yourself, would you? You're going to pay an attorney, and sometimes you're going to pay, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, depending on what the case is all about. My concern is that you're going to have some sellers and some buyers that get misinformation out there and think this is easy and decide to start the process or do the process on their own. Well, like I said earlier, I know that some have the ability to do that. However, when they get into the minutia of it, there's so many rules and laws in the
Yes,
state.
and unless you're doing it on a regular basis, you can't do it on your own. You can try. I have a friend of mine, became a friend of mine client. They just bought about a year ago, a $2 million home in Henderson.
Right.
Now, this guy's savvy. He's got a marvelous worldwide business. How many times did he pull me aside and, what about this? What about, you think I should? He didn't know.
Right.
And this is this is a sharp guy.
Right.
A highly smart and successful guy. He needed somebody to help him through the process.
Right. Of course. It's a daunting task.
Of course it is.
And so my concern is for those people that fall into the trap of, oh, we can do this on our own. You could always do it on your own. However, those that are going to jump into it, I'm concerned about the buyer that's going to be taken advantage of.
Oh, I know.
Because they didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't know what to ask for, and
I know
they
it.
didn't get an inspection done. They didn't know they had the right for an inspection. They didn't know that they could do this thing called request for repairs.
Or they'll be took. I've seen this where we had an inspection done, and we'll let you use our inspection. The deal fell through, probably because of the inspection. We'll let you. And people, I don't want to spend them. I had a guy one time out in Pahrump. They didn't want to spend the money. Of course, he had to sign a waiver. He moves in. It took a while to move in. Moves in a few months later. Middle of summer, AC, none. Just didn't work at all.
Right.
If he had an inspection from a legitimate licensed inspector,
Right.
he would have known that. Could have been negotiated, could have been repaired. Everything's
Sure.
fine.
I hope he had a home warranty of some sort.
He had a home warranty, but it was still was a lot of money.
And without the inspection to certify the working condition of the AC, some of the home warranties will now negate the home warranty. So now
right.
you're out of pocket $3,000, $4,000, $5,000,
$10,000.
So save a couple of $100 here or there, and it will cost you, or could cost you, thousands. So I'm concerned a little bit, and I'm just hopeful that we get our industry educated, get our agents educated and comfortable.
Well, that's what you're doing. You're
Right.
out there. You're out there doing it. You are a great educator.
Well, thanks. I
and you're
appreciate
so.
that.
Yeah, I won't go on. I don't want to, but you are. You do just.
Well,
you
thank
do a
you.
great job of educating our agents, and you do it in such a simple, easy to understand way.
Right. Well, you know what? There are some folks out there right now. I won't mention any names, but there are some folks out there that are making this change, this NAR settlement, sound like the sky is falling, and so it creates turmoil, and oh my gosh, and it's the last big change that we had in our industry, for those that are watching, for the members of the public, the last big change we had was about 32 years ago. And it was in December of 1992 when the Supreme Court of Minnesota held up what's called the Edina ruling, the Edina case. And this is what changed agency and buyer agency and seller agency and disclosure requirements all across the country. And I remember I had been in touch with Edina's attorneys during this process. The owners of Edina Realty gave me permission to talk to them. And at this time, I was the chairperson for the Real Estate Division's Agency Task Force. So I was very, very involved in this. And then some of the disclosure forms that we use at the state level today, I actually authored. But when this all transpired and we started training the industry about what the new requirements were, just like we're going to go through now, the industry thought, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world. This is horrible. And you know what? It turned out to be a bump in the road, a blip, and it's nothing. It actually turned out to be better for the consumer.
Yes. Take a minute and explain what that was. Would you mind, please, JC? How it changed, the agency changed?
Well, sure. What happened in that situation, I'll try and give the short version. What happened in that situation was, for years and years and years in the United States, when an agent took a listing and put it in the computer, before agency rules were changed, every agent in the multiple listing service was considered a sub-agent of the seller. So even though you were the one that was out in the car working with the buyer and showing them property and writing the offer for them, legally and technically, you were actually an agent, a sub-agent of the seller.
So where was your loyalty?
Well, that's what prompted the lawsuit.
Right.
And this was a good lawsuit.
I think it was great.
Because the National Association of Realtors, again, private property rights and protecting the public, had done surveys every year. They do surveys still every year. And they survey people that sold and people that bought in the prior 12 months. And so one of the questions they started asking, they did it 3 or 4 years in a row, was of buyers that had purchased in the last 12 months. I'm going back to this era, the way it used to be. And they asked the buyer, hey, you bought a house in the last 12 months. The agent that you worked with, was that your agent or was that the seller's agent? Now, I just told you legally, technically, it was the seller's agent. And yet, over 80% of the buyers surveyed 3 years in a row said, well, that was our agent. So we realized that, oh my gosh, we've got what's known legally as undisclosed dual agency. And so we started rectifying that. We started working on that here in 1986 and 7. And all the states started working on it. And in Minnesota, back to that case, Minnesota, the state, the real estate division had passed a rule that said, okay, when you're working with a buyer, a buyer or a seller, you've got to give them this sheet that explains what a buyer agent does, what a seller's agent does, and what an agent representing both parties is responsible to. And so they started using that. And I created a form here, along with a couple of the other big companies and their attorneys. We created a form here that we started using in the late 80s, before the law change took effect in 95. And so Edina in Minnesota Edina Realty was the 7th largest independent real estate firm in the country, and they were the largest independent real estate firm in Minnesota. And they were using this form that was mandated by the state. And a group came along and sued them and said, hey, we're suing you for not properly disclosing agency. And Edina said, well, what are you talking about? We're using the state mandated form. And they said, no, we know you're using the state mandated form. However, we don't think that complies with the common law, which comes from England, but is considered federal law, okay? We don't think you're complying with the common law of agency. And they said, how so? And they said, well, you're telling a buyer, so if Edina Real Estate had a listing here and a different branch and a different agent from this branch of Edina Realty sold the property, in the olden days, if they were with Edina, they all represented the seller. So even though they might not have known each other, so this agent would write, since it was an Edina Realty listing, and disclose that agent representing both sides. That Edina Realty represents both sides, and they would have that party sign it, and the seller would sign it, and they complied with state law. The lawsuit alleged that, no, you were not disclosing to them what it might mean to them.
Yeah.
The bad side of that, what the conflict of interest was. You didn't disclose that. And they were right, because the form didn't disclose that. So on a technicality...
That changed, was it 92?
That was in December of 1992. The Supreme Court of Minnesota ruled on that and upheld a prior verdict. And that's when we all started changing. All 50 states changed their agency law, and that's when I created, as a result of that, the duties owed form. Yeah. And the consent to act form. The consent to act form is the form that must be used here in Nevada if an agent is representing both the buyer and the seller. Yeah. And so we changed our agency laws here a little bit, and I think it's been a real benefit to the public.
Oh, a big benefit. I think what the consumer needs to know is there are people like you that are out there, and you are creating these forms to help protect the consumer.
Correct.
You know, some people think that realtors are like, I saw a post from a guy I know, I won't call him a friend, and he put a real derogatory post about realtors. And it was just based on such stupid, silly stuff that it was. But we've got people like you that are out there. We want the consumer to feel comfortable. We want the consumer to feel safe. We want them to look forward to their next home purchase. We want them to have a wonderful experience.
Sure.
It doesn't benefit anybody for it to happen any other way.
Right. And by the way, if it turns out, you said earlier that the home you buy isn't really an investment. That's true. However, it turns out that it does build wealth.
It does build wealth. And it's the easiest way to build wealth.
And there's nothing better than reaching your golden years and actually having the financial capability above and beyond just Social Security or whatever small pension you might have to do whatever it is you want, whether it's visit the grandkids, whether it's jump in a trailer and go all over the United States, whether it's to go all over Europe, whether it's to go to Asia, whatever, let's...
How about if it's just to put your head in the pillow at night and have peace of mind that you own that home?
Right.
No one can take it from you. It's yours.
That's wonderful.
My goodness.
There's no better feeling.
No.
And so, anyway, I all of this. And by the way, thank you. I know that you're part of the VA rep and we talked about that, but I also know that, and I don't know if your viewers know that, you are and have been instrumental in a leadership program that you're one of the trustees that really blew that program up the last couple of
You
years.
started that program.
Well,
JC, everybody that has taken that, and I sat through the one I sat through initially, plus 2 or 3 others as a trustee. Man, what a great program. I'm sorry that it's gone.
Well, I don't know that it's
hopefully
gone.
It'll come back.
I think it's going through some changes, and hopefully they bring it back
I
for
will
the
tell
industry.
you,
It's,
that was a great program. It really helped, especially younger realtors.
Yeah. But your contribution to that is one of the things that made that great. So
thank you.
So thank you.
I appreciate that, man. Look, I love this business, and whatever I can do to help out, I want to do it.
I feel the same way. This business has been awfully good to me. I raised my daughters. My oldest daughter is in this business, and she actually is a coach across the country and works with huge teams all across the country. And raised my other daughter. I won't take credit for it. She's a doctor, a behavior analyst that lives here in Reno now. And in fact, she's flying in this afternoon to spend the weekend with us. So,
well, I'll tell you, I first got into. I was never had an interest in selling real estate. I was looking for a different change in careers, and I started selling real estate franchises for Sundance. And you were on the road 5 days a week,
sure,
pretty much 4 or 5 days a week.
Sure.
And one of the guys who I sold a franchise to in Detroit, we're having lunch. I said, I'm getting tired. This road thing has gotten old. And he said, why don't you try real estate? I thought, you know what? What the heck? Give it a shot.
Yeah.
And man, I fell in love with it as fast as I got into it.
Yeah.
And I just love this business.
Sure.
It's just a great business, and what you can do to help people is just marvelous.
Right. Yeah, no, Sundance, they owned Century 21.
Century 21, I sold the ERA franchise.
Okay.
And they Caldwell Banker.
Sure.
And about a dozen hotels. They're one of the ones they settled the suit.
They settled.
What do they call themselves now? Anytime home or
anywhere.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I was the regulatory compliance manager for the #1 Century 21 in the world.
Oh.
Which happened to be located here in Las Vegas
Isn't
at the
that
time.
something?
Yeah.
Was that Money World?
Mm-hmm. It was, yeah.
Okay. That's where you met a lot of those great folks like Bobby and.
Sure, that's right.
Yeah.
I was there. I was their broker. Now they merged in. They're part of Berkshire Hathaway, which is another great firm here in town. And we've got some great people that are looking out for for the public. And
I can tell you, because we're both involved with the real estate community, the majority of people out there are looking out for the consumer.
Sure.
There's a few jerks out there, but you're going to find that in any business.
Right.
And look, I can't thank you enough for taking the time, how busy you are. And
it was my pleasure.
Oh, man. Yeah. I do like to ask guests when they come on a couple questions about Las Vegas.
Yeah. You
got a favorite restaurant?
Oh, yeah. There's a couple, if I can think of the name of them. I'm bad at the names. I like the old Vegas kind of stuff. So one of my favorites, and I think it's a secret, is the Italian American Club.
Oh, man. We went and saw Buck.
Yeah.
We saw Buck there.
Yeah.
Food's great.
A friend of ours
who's a realtor who's active. He's also used to be in Jersey Boys. And
he was one of the stars of Jersey Boys.
Yes, he's a talented guy.
Yeah.
What a great show.
Yeah, so they have great food there, and they usually have a duet or a trio or a quartet playing all old Vegas stuff. Sinatra, Dean Martin. If you've never experienced the Italian American Club, I just think it's a wonderful spot. So there's a couple of other spots in town that I like, and
I still love going to the Pepper Mill.
Oh, is that right?
It's just a funny atmosphere.
Sure.
The food's not great. Big portions, but the atmosphere.
Yeah,
it's old Vegas.
Sure, that's old Vegas. I can remember I used to go there before I moved here. I moved here in 1976, and but I used to come down and visit here. I had an apartment here for a couple years before I moved here, and the Pepper Mill was always a stop. And
Batista's hole in the wall.
Oh, sure,
it's a fun, little quaint little. I still like that little bar on the corner behind Batista's. I think they sell the quarter-pound hot dog and a beer for $2. The stage door.
Yes.
Old school.
Yeah.
It's owned by Caesars. I always thought it was independently owned.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah. I've been there many times. Not for years, but I've
been
there many times. Yeah.
How about favorite show in town?
Oh, boy.
That's tough.
There are so many shows. Living here for 47, 48 years now, I've seen, some of the new shows I'm not up to speed on, but I got a chance to see virtually all of the shows.
Hard to beat a Cirque, isn't it?
Cirque, oh, those shows
Hard to
are,
beat those.
yeah,
Every one of them.
they are incredible. They are incredible. And one of the things that I've got to tell you, we just went Sunday to a matinee. I took my family to a matinee. I love the fact that we have the Smith Center.
Oh, man.
So that is...
we were there about a month ago, and the Myron's Cabaret.
Sure, Myron's is...
Not a bad seat in the house.
It's not just if you've not been down there, it's not just a theater for big Broadway shows.
No.
They've got Myron's, which is they've got some great jazz. We went down there and saw a huge rock and roll rendition down there. We were down there about a month ago for that, and then Sunday we were down there for Funny Girl.
Oh, man. The other thing people don't realize is because we are the entertainment capital of the world, and there's only so many rooms on the Strip, you go out in the suburbs, and some of these little pubs
Sure.
have sometimes free, sometimes $10 for fabulous entertainment.
Oh, unbelievable! Yeah, and I can remember the '70s when I first got here. We used to all go to the Sahara Hotel. We'd go there around midnight, 12:30 at night, and that's where a lot of Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Lola Falana, those guys, they would come in. There's a little showroom kind of off the casino floor, and they'd pick up a mic and sing and have fun. I can remember Sammy Davis Jr. There's probably 100 of us in there at 1 a.m, and Sammy Davis said, "Hey, who wants to go bowling?" And so about 40 of us went over to the Showboat Hotel, which doesn't exist anymore, but over on Boulder Highway, it had a big bowling alley. Myself, Sammy Davis Jr., Lola Falana, and then just a bunch of other people that were there, and we went over and went bowling from 2 a.m. till 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah, very cool. And the last one is outdoor activities. People don't realize what fabulous outdoor activities we have out here. You got a favorite?
Well, you know what? The trails we have for those that are visiting the city or that live here, if Red Rock and Mount Charleston, and the trails are incredible. We
have a trail system in Clark County that is second to none.
Oh yeah, the trail system in Clark County has improved drastically, and who's driven that a lot has been the city of Henderson. Because they created some incredible trails. Summerlin probably started it first, and then Henderson really adopted it. And now both sides of town are competing. They're connecting the Southwest. And, we can, my wife and I, we ride bikes, so it's about that time of year for us to start doing that. We'll ride a bike, and we can go from our house, we can go a couple of blocks, jump on a trail. Now, we live up in the Southwest, so up in Rainbow, Durango, and the 215 area. And we can go from there all the way into Boulder City.
Isn't that fabulous?
On trail. So we'll ride our bike. So it's a 40-some mile round trip, and we'll ride into Boulder City, have lunch, and then ride back.
That's a quaint little town, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it is. Yeah.
There's so much great stuff out here. Just listen, folks. Come on and see us. If you're not here in town, man, come on and join us. There's nothing like living in Las Vegas.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, my man.
You bet.
Very much appreciate it. Beta, thank you for putting this on. Everybody have a great weekend. Be kind to each other. It's crazy out there, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.